The biggest benefit for me was really the self-awareness from a completely different perspective. I think the person that's indispensable, irreplaceable, is someone that adds more value than anybody else. But I think the ability to listen is actually what makes someone, that is one ingredient, I would say, of being a leader. Because so much of communication is actually listening, not talking.
Over the past decade, Peter Karius has worked with business leaders from some of the largest and most innovative companies in the world. Peter knows that there is a better and a faster way for you to fulfill your career ambitions and become the leader that you aspire to be. Today, he is on a mission to help managers struggling to become leaders to master the leadership skills they need in order to become indispensable today and in the future. It's exciting to have Peter on because I'm in the wireless industry, and I know that there are a lot of leaders in different industries and even people who are aspiring to be leaders in all these different industries who are being let go from their businesses and let go from their companies. The economy is in a very interesting place right now, specifically in the United States. I'm not sure about how it is internationally, but I'm sure it's very similar to the fact that the more valuable you become as a leader, the more opportunities you will have to create the life and the career that you desire. So Peter, it's a great opportunity to have you on the show, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So talk to me about the indispensable leader. You talk a lot about helping managers become leaders. I want to talk to you about what that difference is, but is your message of becoming irreplaceable and indispensable even more important in today's time than ever before?
I'm not sure it's more important. I mean, it'd be easy for me to say yes. I think it's always important. I think the person that's indispensable, irreplaceable, is someone that adds more value than anybody else. And that because they do that, they really make themselves, irreplaceable, unless the company takes an extremely short-sighted view of the future of the particular area that person has an impact in. But if someone is genuinely indispensable, if they genuinely add more value than anybody else, then it's very hard for that person to not have a place. Actually, it's very hard for that person not to have a place wherever they want to go. I think that's the message actually I'm sending more so than anything else. Yeah, you may be, you may even be let go as that person. But trust me, if you're actually adding that much value, if you're such a good performer, then no matter what the economic climate is, you'll always find a place. And then we see that time and time again, whether it's individuals or companies. The people that, they thrive in times of crisis are ultimately the people that will thrive no matter when. It's easier to thrive, in good times. It's much harder to thrive in bad times. But certainly the person that is equipped to thrive at any time, they will make themselves indispensable.
So this individual who's equipped to thrive during crisis, is that a learned ability? Is that something that you are built for just from the beginning? What are your thoughts there?
I think, so my personal, philosophy on development in general is it's all based on conditioning, whether that's a conscious effort that an individual or their surrounding environment takes, or whether it's something that is unconsciously done, again based on the environment and the people that support that person. You can certainly learn to, in my opinion, you can learn any skill, whether it's leadership, whether it's management, whether it's decision making, negotiation, whatever that is, you can learn that because it's all a skill at the end of the day. We talk about people being naturally born to be good at something. And I think we have to be very careful with that because actually, when we look at that person that is, a natural born leader, they've just had an environment growing up that allowed them to thrive and be a leader. If you're encouraged to be a leader, you're more likely to actually be a leader. If you're discouraged from taking charge, if you're discouraged from making decisions for yourself, discouraged from communicating your points of view, of course, it's going to be much harder for you to even see yourself as that individual. So from my point of view, it's certainly a set of skills that anybody can master if they truly dedicate themselves to doing so.
I love that. So you just said a few things there. When it comes to being a leader, it comes down to making decisions for yourself. It comes down to being able to take charge. It comes down to communicating. And as someone who, I grew up in an environment where my father was a business owner. He does construction. He's a business owner, but he's got himself and one other employee. And then my mom always worked too while I grew up. So I come from an environment where both of them made their own decisions. Both of them communicated. Both of them worked very hard. So I saw that, and just naturally I replicated that. But I feel that I've had to exert myself in different ways because I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert. So is it your philosophy that even as an introvert, someone who is more internal than external, is it as possible for an introvert to become as strong and as valuable as a leader in this age from what you've seen?
100%. I mean, I understand the differentiation obviously between extrovert and introvert. I think, when you look at what does it mean to be an introvert, and maybe you can answer the question better than me, but it's probably someone that listens more than they talk. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. Like as an example, people probably are surprised by this because I have a show where I talk to people. However, it's like what you just said, more listening than talking, at least most of the time. But even during situations where I'm doing a solo show or I'm going out and presenting for a team or virtual, whatever it is, afterwards, I have to recharge in terms of if I have like 3 social events in a day of any kind, like networking, meeting, anything, afterwards, I feel this burnt outness that I have to take to myself and either read or do something else that brings me joy, or for your case, maybe golfing. So I have to recharge after those social encounters.
Sure. 100%. Yeah. And I think that's but I think the ability to listen is actually what makes someone is one ingredient, I would say, of being a leader. Because so much of communication is actually listening, not talking, right? You can talk all day long, but if you're never listening and never actually tuning into the people you're talking to, you could be talking, past each other. And that's what happens a lot, right? We see people that talk a lot, they don't really listen a lot. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't ever talk, but I actually think it's much more impactful when you're in a meeting or an environment, unless you're the speaker, obviously. But if you're in a meeting as a leader, to listen to everybody and give everybody space to talk, ask really good questions. Because first of all, let's be humble enough to understand we don't always know the answer to everything. And I think that's also, being a leader is you understand that. You understand that actually, okay, I have a view here of this, but let me talk to the people that are around the table. Because honestly, why else are they here if not to challenge my point of view? So if you're able to ask questions, if you're able to really get the best out of people with your questions through your listening and giving them space because they actually feel heard, that to me is leadership, because you bring people together and you're getting them to give you things, and then you can make a decision based on that, whether you do that in whatever manner you do that, whether you do it on your own, whether you do it collectively, that's a whole other conversation. But I don't think that being extrovert or introvert or any kind of combination, whatever spectrum, makes you better or worse as a leader. I think you need to understand what is it that your natural tendency is and how does it help you, or maybe how does it hinder you from being very good at interacting with people. Someone that feels that they need to talk all the time, they're probably not listening as well. Whereas someone that doesn't talk a lot, they need to also understand, do I need to talk some more sometimes? Am I talking too little? So I think there's a balance, right? But I don't believe personally that one preference, if you will, dictates whether you can be a good or a bad leader, or good or a great leader.
Yeah, you make me think of someone specifically who they became a new area sales manager. This was like 4 years ago, but they became a new area sales manager, and we have these monthly meetings where we would each drive 2 hours. We'd come together and meet. We'd get food, and this individual, they were a new leader, but they'd been in the business for a long time, and his name is Jordan. So shout out to you, Jordan. He would always be in the back of the room. And as all of these, 8 to 9 others of us were discussing and having conversation and trying to figure out the best strategy to accomplish whatever initiative we were focusing on, he would just be sitting back there, just being quiet and just listening. And to the point where we're just looking back because we would forget he's there because he would never really join in with anything. And our leader, Luke, would at the end of each topic just look back there and say, Jordan, you've been pretty quiet. Do you have any thoughts on this? And he would always be silent for like 5 seconds after that. And he would just softly give an idea based on the ideas that everyone else gave. And it was the best idea out of anybody. And Luke is like, have you had this idea the whole time? And everyone would laugh and we'd celebrate him and we'd be like, we're going to go with that. And he was just always a quiet guy, but he had the greatest ideas, but he listened 95% and he spoke maybe 5%.
Yeah, exactly. But again, let's not dismiss people that talk a lot either, right? Because there's a lot of value, especially some people, they like to talk things out. That's how they think. So I don't want anybody to take this away that we're saying don't ever talk, right? I think it's your personal preference. Just understand how it impacts other people. And if you see that you have people like, I think what Luke, I think you mentioned, did was amazing. He actually asked that person. A lot of people won't. A lot of people will just, kind of say, well, they never talk. I guess they're not interested. No, he actually understood that this person has something to say, but they have a different preference of how to say it. Whereas everybody else is like, hey, I want to talk, right? And he actually realized, okay, Jordan has something valuable to say. Let me give him the forum to do so. Really powerful leadership.
Yeah, he was a great leader, 100%. So I want to talk about your leadership history, because we've already got started on a hot start here, but people are probably wondering, who is Peter? So the first thing I want to start this with is, I have a dream car that I will own one day. And that car, you already know, that car is a Rolls Royce. That's like a dream car. And you've actually worked with Rolls Royce in a global leadership position, which I found very interesting, making and negotiating deals for billions of dollars USD. So talk about like, did you start with them? Did you move to them? Like, just if you could give me a brief history of who is Peter and why do you speak on leadership nowadays?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to disappoint you, because I didn't work in the car area. I worked in the aerospace division. So the car is actually owned by BMW. So yeah, the Germans own Rolls Royce. Good. I mean, no, I actually worked in the aerospace division.
Okay.
I started right out of college. I joined Rolls Royce in a procurement management development program, I guess you'd call it. And I worked my way up through different parts of the business. And I ended up, I guess, after 6 years or so, in a global management role, as you mentioned, overseeing very sizable deals, sort of very long-term, complex strategic deals that the company was contracting with other Fortune 500 companies, sometimes even larger than Rolls-Royce itself. And so it led me onto this path of progressing on the corporate ladder. And like a lot of people, it comes with the necessity, I'm going to call it that very intentionally, of managing and leading people. That was not necessarily something that I was looking forward to be completely transparent about it. I just thought, okay, well, it's a necessary evil of advancing, in your career. And I certainly don't feel that way now anymore, of course, but at the time, initially, I did. But I'm someone that, having grown up playing golf competitively, it's a single sport. Yes, there's a team element to it, but it's always yourself that is responsible for your results. So I take that attitude in any area of my life. So I thought, well, am I, as a person responsible for these for my team, am I doing the best I can? And it's kind of hard to answer that question as a yes, especially when you're very early on in your days. And if you're being honest, the answer can be yes, I'm doing really well, but I could do better. I think that should always be the answer from my point of view. So I looked at how can I improve, and I enrolled in I would call the standard sort of leadership management training that was offered from different institutions that we were all familiar with. And I thought it was interesting. I thought it was intellectually interesting, but I never really found that it led to a profound change in how I was showing up as a leader. Now, I will take some personal responsibility here and say maybe I didn't implement as much as I could have, but I also didn't find that it really lent itself to actually developing the individual. Because the way I look at leadership is, I share this at times, there's three levels of leadership, and it's leading yourself as the first level, leading others is the second level, and developing other leaders the third level. And you want to think of it as a pyramid. It's the leading yourself, the foundation element, level one, is the most important piece. And I felt that a lot of the leadership training was aimed at leading others and developing other leaders, which is obviously incredibly important. But I realized early on that if you're not leading yourself personally, the self-leadership element, as well as you could be, then your ability to do the other two things is just not going to be as good as it could be if you're really strong at leading yourself. So I looked at, well, how could I do that? And I stumbled onto coaching really, by accident. And I hired a coach myself because I wanted to improve. I was really fascinated with the approach of coaching. Sort of read some articles about it, but I thought, Peter, let's just take a step back for a second. How do you become a better coach? Just by getting coached yourself. So
Mm.
that was my philosophy. I thought, if you actually want to understand how to coach your employees, you should probably invest in a coach. So that's what I did. And then I kind of started on this whole journey, which I never, intended to be where I am today, to be very honest with you. It's happened because I realized how impactful it is, and actually how effective it was for me in in using it in the corporate world. So that's how I kind of came full circle into the space. I was very passionate about what I was doing, but I was more passionate about leadership coaching. And so at the end of 2019, rather, so towards the middle, the end of 2019, I decided to leave my corporate job, and start out in this world of helping others develop, because I really wanted to give it a try and see how I could be more effective. Because when I was in the leadership space in the corporate world, there are other considerations. Let's just leave it at that, of developing the individual. And nowadays, I feel I can really fully develop the individual as a leader, irrespective of the environment that they're in.
So when you really dove into that first step, so again, those 3 steps, because we're going to talk about those.
Sure.
We've got the first step is lead yourself, which I heavily relate to, and we'll talk about that. 2 is lead other people, right? A lot of people try to start with number 2, especially new salespeople I meet in the company I work with. They're really good. They're making great sales in the first 3 months, and they're like, I want to become a leader. But there's all these different gaps that exist in their own strategy and their own philosophy.
Yeah.
And you have to lead yourself before you can lead others. So we'll talk about that. And then number 3 is grow other leaders. And I've seen a lot of leaders think about growing other. And by the way, this was me too. It's not just me talking about other people. I found a lot of leaders almost afraid to grow leaders behind them and teach other people how to perform in their role, so that one day they can move up and the person behind them can take their spot. They feel almost like it's competition or a threat to raise someone up. So lead yourself, lead others, and grow other leaders. Now, when you really dove into the first step of leading yourself, you were a leader inside of the company already. Did you have the title of leader? Would you say?
Yeah,
at that
a manager. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you invested in a coach, and you said from there it webbed off in many different directions, which ultimately led you to where you are today.
Yeah.
What was, because a lot of people who haven't worked with a coach yet are very tentative to work with one, because they don't know whether it's worth it. They don't know whether it's going to be seen as weird. Like, why do I need a coach? Right? Like, did you have any hesitation to hire the coach? And what made you finally say, I'm going to hire a coach because I need this?
Massive hesitation. I had massive resistance. Yeah. And it was funny. I just actually recently spoke to my wife about this, and I said, it's interesting to reflect back. So here's the thing, which at the time was the biggest paradigm shift for me, was actually investing in my own professional development. And this is really weird to say, but I come across it all the time, and I understand people. When you're in the corporate world, you're used to the company paying for your professional development. It's very common. And again, I was in that place as well. Now I look at it and say, well, actually, it's my career. It's my professional development. Why would I expect somebody else to pay for that? It's nice if they do, but I'm equally, actually, if I want to advance in my career, I should want to do it no matter who pays for it. So that was, but yeah, I had a very strong resistance to making that initial investment. I won't lie about that. It certainly took me a while to get over that. And it wasn't even a big sum of money compared to the money I was making. It was just so, out of character. It's like, oh, well, why don't I just invest in this money in shares? But actually the investment in a coach is, pays off so much more. Certainly, myself, I've seen it myself, obviously, my own clients. But yeah, it was a big paradigm shift to do that. Absolutely.
Sure. And what would you say was the greatest benefit that you found from working with a coach that maybe you didn't even think about beforehand, but you found as you continued to work with this individual?
The biggest benefit for me was really the self-awareness from a completely different perspective. I think it's very easy, especially when you're in large organizations, but also just when you're in a specific industry, to get really wrapped up in how things are done in that industry, at that company, or even in the vision that you're in the company. But when you're working with a coach that isn't part of your system at all, and I'd actually encourage you to not work with someone that kind of even knows the industry very much, you get a completely different perspective. And that different perspective enables you to start questioning how you show up yourself. that is the number one step, right? It's not about making yourself wrong. It's just about the self-awareness piece. I always think, people ask me what's the most important trait of a leader. It's self-awareness, hands down. If you're not aware of yourself, how are you really going to be better at leading yourself, better at leading others, better developing other leaders? Because that self-awareness always comes first. If you want to make a change, you need to be self-aware. And we know this for a strategy. We know this when we want to make organizational changes. We always need to understand where we are and where we want to go, right? But for some reason, when we talk about personal development or leadership development, we don't always look at that piece. We look at where we want to go, but not where we are. But how are you going to close the gap if you don't know where you are? So that for me was the biggest insight, like that completely different level of self-awareness that I got. Just because I was challenged is the wrong word, but I was given a different perspective of how I was doing things, how I was showing up as an individual, and how I could actually do it. Not based on modeling people that were in my world, but actually just looking at how I wanted to do it, irrespective of how people were doing it in my space.
Yes. I hired my first coach in 2021, and I was very hesitant to do it because it was a good price tag, and it was the best decision I ever made because of exactly what you just said. Someone from outside of your industry, someone who doesn't have this, someone who has a different viewpoint on everything. And I would have an idea to do something, and they would say, well, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about doing something like this? Or, hey, I've done something similar, and this is what I did. This is what you could do to make it even better. Like all these little, like I would have an idea, and then they would add something powerful to the idea that would make it that much more valuable. Yeah. Also, it inspired confidence in me and what I was doing, right? So there's so many different benefits, that to the point where I work with several different kinds of coaches now for different areas of life. When I started with one, but now I've got several. And some of my favorite parts of the week are the conversations that I have with my coaches. And you got to find the right person. You got to find someone you vibe with, you gel with, someone, like you said, from outside the industry, preferably. And you can't be afraid to invest in your growth, because that money will come back to you in boatloads, as long as you get the right person.
Yes, but I agree with you. I think it's a really valid point. It has to be somebody that you want to interact with. It's a very personal relationship. Even when it's a group setup, you still have to want to engage with that person on an ongoing basis. Absolutely.
100%. So I asked you, I said, were you in a leadership role at that time? And you said, yes, a management role. Now, your word for manager and leader have different definitions. When would you say you personally transitioned from being a manager to becoming a leader? Was it when you hired that coach? Was it afterwards? Was it before? Like, when was that during your timeline?
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint a specific moment. I can't, say I had this one eureka moment. I do believe that leaders have to be very good managers as well. I don't like this differentiation where people say, well, you're either a manager or a leader. I think you still have to be a very good manager when you're a leader, because it is a skill set that you have to have. The way I differentiate it is basically managing tasks or leading people. But even when you're a CEO, there's still a level of task management that has to happen, right? There's still a level of understanding of what goes on a task level. And when I say task as a CEO, it's more like a project or program level, but there's still something like that there. But I think really for me, it shifts when you start paying more attention to people and get things done through people, and less attention to the task and how the task gets done. And your ability to let go of how the task gets done and just focus more on the result and the outcome, and help the person achieve the outcome with the support that they need, and not how you'd like to do it. That for me is that change when you transition from being a manager only to also being a leader.
Oh man, that's powerful. So let's talk about what you just said, because that's really good. That idea of delegation, of giving these different tasks to different people, but not telling them necessarily, hey, I want you to, let's use a practical example. Hey, I want you to create a group of people who you're going to help groom up as leaders to help them move from their position to the next position, right? So you could say, now the first step to do it is this. The next step is I would do this, and then I would do this. Yeah. You just say, this is the result that we're looking to achieve. And I trust you as the right person that I'm delegating this to do what you believe is right in order to achieve this result. Come to me with whatever questions you have. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I even go beyond delegation, because delegation to me still implies that you retain responsibility. And of course you do, because I mean, the responsibility always stops with you as a leader. But at the same time, I would say if you empower other people to actually do it. But yes,
what's the difference? Tell me
the
the
difference is that you actually give someone the responsibility to do it. You're actually saying,
but you still hold the responsibility.
Ultimately, from an organizational point of view, right? You do, but you can give this to somebody else and say, I trust you do this 100%. Keep me updated. If you need questions, I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always going to be here to help you with it. I'm not going to question how you do it. I'm going to challenge you maybe, but I'm not going to question it, right? So I think there's a difference there, at least from my understanding. I'm going to support you 100%. And if you need the help, whatever the help looks like, I'll provide it to you, but it's your task. Versus, here's something I want you to do, like you just said, and you're going to do it in these ways, and you're going to report to me every single day on it. And you know, if you don't do it this way, then I'm going to have to take it away from you. Like that is a completely different conversation from my point of view. And I think most people delegate, they don't empower. But when you're empowering somebody to actually do, you know, the work, when you empower them to actually get the result, right? This is what it's about. It's about what result are you after, not are you invested in the way it's done. Of course, I'm not suggesting break processes, any sort of something like that. But what I'm saying is, how can this be done differently, just by somebody looking at it from a different point of view? Because like I said initially, right, we don't always have the answer, even though as a leader, some people feel that they have to have the answer all the time. Be humble enough to understand other people have really good ideas too, possibly better ideas than you, or at least ideas that challenge your understanding.
I've never heard it described that way before. Delegation versus empowerment, and the difference there. I love that. Thanks for going into that. Now let's talk practicality. And I know it can be difficult to do that because we've got people from different industries, different companies, and maybe their own business. Like it'll be difficult to do that. But I'm curious, when you talk to people and you say, you know, not everyone, but some people, you say you've got to be a leader who is adding massive levels of value. I bet a lot of people are thinking in their mind, yep, that's me. I'm adding massive levels of value. I'm irreplaceable. They'll never get rid of me. No one would ever take my role. And then next week they get the email saying we've cut your role. And they're thinking, well, how could they do that? Why me? I'm the best. I'm valuable. Like, how do you measure massive value?
Yeah. I mean, it's not always that tangible, right? I think if you brought the example of sales. So I think sales is relatively easy to draw the analogy and say, if you're constantly over delivering, it's relatively easy to say you're adding massive value. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is how are you developing others, right? I mean, back to what you were saying, are you actually developing other leaders? Like, are you actually making yourself obsolete, right? I think the way I look at leadership, and this is just a definition that I've kind of sort of tailored from my point of view, is leadership is creating a standard in somebody else, like a way of doing something that they can do it without you by their side, right? They can do that consistently all the time without you needing to hold their hand to do it. And so it's kind of counterintuitive to what you're saying, but if you're making yourself obsolete, you're actually making yourself irreplaceable, because you're creating so many other people that could do what you're doing, which is the real value you're adding, because that is what is lacking. You can find people to do the entry-level roles, but for people to be able to step up into the next level and really perform there, that's what's much more difficult to find. So if you're able to develop those types of people, right, and with the understanding of how it all starts with leading themselves, then developing other leaders, and then again them also growing other leaders, that's really the true measure. Can you do that? Like I said, it's the adding massive value is sometimes very tangible. Again, I'm from procurement background, so it's basically how much money do you save, how much do you contract better than the target, those sorts of things. When you have numbers, it's very easy to do, but it goes beyond numbers. Now, of course, what I also want to acknowledge is that the ability to develop other leaders isn't necessarily always recognized. Very few people probably have a performance measure that's related to that. at least not a very tangible one. So it becomes hard. But what I want to say though is, just because you've been let go from somewhere doesn't mean that you are irreplaceable. It just means the company's made a decision.
Wow.
Your role is, but you as an individual, it doesn't affect your value as a person. And I see a lot of talk about how being let go affects your confidence. And I do understand that. Obviously, I have a lot of sympathy for that. But I also just want to say to people, the result, i.e. the fact that you've been let go, is it should only be a very small portion of your confidence. Because actually your confidence is also made up of your beliefs about yourself, what you've achieved in the past, so your previous results, and just what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Let me describe it this way, right? And this may seem like an odd example, but we're all very confident in the ability to tie our shoes, right? No matter what I say to you, you're not going to say, yeah, Peter, you're right, I can't have a shoe. No, you're always going to believe that, right?
Yeah.
Why is it different when you've performed really well in a job? You've always added massive value. Now someone's let you go. Why does that mean your confidence should suffer?
Yeah.
And I know that's a different perspective. And I understand the fact that it's a blow to your perception at times. But I also want to invite people to look at it from a different point of view and saying, what does that decision have to do with your confidence? So just a different perspective to offer to people that are kind of affected by this.
Oh man, I love that. It's the idea of not taking it personally, because if you got let go, like you said, you might have been extremely valuable. You might be irreplaceable. However, they might just not be able to have you on the team. They might have to reorganize things. You just didn't make the cut. Someone might have been doing it for longer who also adds a lot of value.
Yeah.
Like it, I love that, because that at the same, what you just did was empowered those people who might be in that position to move on to the next opportunity, which might even be a greater opportunity than the one that they were in previously.
Yeah, exactly. And, I know it's an age-old saying and we've all heard it, but when one door closes, another one opens. Stop focusing on the one that's closed because it's closed.
Wow.
Like it is, right? Let's be really factual about this. And so the focus on the past in that sense isn't going to help you. It just isn't. You can learn from it if there is indeed something to learn from. But again, we know that decisions in organizations aren't always taken with the best, the consideration of what's best for the individual. Actually, they're mostly not taken from that perspective. They're taken from what's best for the company right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a big assumption right now and just say a lot of the people listening are already pouring into themselves and leading themselves. Big assumption, right? But they're listening to this show. They're probably working with a coach or some other kind of professional development to get even better. So let's move on to what you just talked about, because I asked you the question, well, what does it actually look like to add massive value? And I know there's a lot that goes into it. We could talk for 3 hours on it or more, but you mentioned the first thing that came to your mind was grow other leaders and help other people become stronger leaders. That's great. So let's talk about two things. One, how do you know when you're ready to move to step 2? And two-part question here, and it's okay wherever you take it. The second part is, how do you know who to begin grooming to that next level?
Sure. I love that question. So, I don't think you should focus solely on level 1 and not do level 2. Like, it's not sort of one of those things where you have to get, an A in level 1 before you move on to level 2. Because actually the work on level 1 never stops. You can always grow in your awareness of something, right? Your ability to make good decisions may be really good today, but you also know it could be better tomorrow. So why be happy with the ability to how you make decisions today, right? The way you plan your day, it may seem very basic, but your ability to plan your day may be really good today, but you may stumble upon a different way of doing it that may allow you to be even more productive, even more efficient tomorrow. And so your ability to develop other leaders really, or excuse me, to lead others rather, really starts with when you're seeing a shift in how you are leading yourself. So let's take the example of decision making. I think decision making really comes down to confusion versus order. So are you accepting that you're confused? Are you not making a decision? Because that's also, indecision is just as much a decision, even though it's typically not a conscious one. Or are you actually just saying, I am going to make a decision where I am with what I have? And once you're in that place, then you can see how other people make decisions and guide them on making decisions in a better way for themselves. Because we see this all the time. People go around, they ask everybody, right? I heard this described this way, why would you go to your neighbor and ask them about, your tooth unless they happen to be a dentist, right? People ask anybody for any sort of advice. So that's not a very good way to make decisions, because you're not actually gathering facts in the best way possible. So it's all about looking at how you've done this for yourself, how you start leading yourself better, and then sharing that journey with others. First and foremost, how do you decide who you should groom?
Yeah, I think you said it a bit already too in what you just mentioned.
Yeah, but I think personally anybody could be a leader if they want to be, right? I don't think not everybody wants to be a leader though. I think that's also very clear to me, and I think that's totally fine, right? I wouldn't ever suggest somebody has to be something. Actually, I think the greatest gift you can give somebody is asking them the question, what do you want? And enabling them to answer that question based on what they actually want, not what they think is possible, not what they think is reasonable or logical, but what they actually want. And they may come up with the question, yes, I'd like to progress, but they may also say, no, I really love being an expert, and I'd love to really become, deeply knowledgeable in this field. And thankfully, a lot of companies understand that actually you should empower people to do that and still give them more status, higher salaries for doing that, right? So there's sort of the technical track and the people management track. So I love that a lot of companies have understood this. Not everybody wants to be leader. I think I said this at the beginning. I want to just say this again. Everybody can be a leader. Just because you're maybe starting out from a place where you don't even see yourself as a leader, it doesn't mean you can't be a leader. You just have to. It's about making a decision whether you actually want to be one. And so it's really about, don't just groom somebody randomly. Understand whether it's an ambition they actually have.
Yeah.
And is it for them about leading others, or is it about progression first and foremost, and about them? Right? Again, I'm not saying one is right and the other is wrong, but if someone's actually interested in leadership, they're interested in empowering others. If it's about progression, which goes hand in hand, but if it's only about progression, then maybe they're not actually wanting to be a leader. They just want to progress. And so it's really about your ability to help people understand what they actually want. And then you help those people achieve that, whatever that is. And that to me is the greatest gift, when you can actually honestly say, I understand now what I want. Can you help me do it?
Yeah.
And
I've been wrong there many times. Let me just tell you,
sure.
Because I've worked very closely with people who were such great salespeople and such great teachers of sales. And I'm thinking of one person specifically. His name is Ben. I would constantly say, Ben, you've got to train people, man. You've got to become a mentor, which is the title, and bring on people and train them on your process. And he's like, he was flattered that I keep saying it, like, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm glad that you noticed me. But I do not want to train people. I do not want to be a leader. I want to do this, make very great money doing it, and then go home with my family and enjoy that time. Like, I don't want to step into leadership. And constantly, I just used to revisit to the point where we needed someone. And I said, hey, can you do me a favor and train this person? And I was thinking in my mind, maybe this will show him that he really wants to do this. But he wasn't as great of a trainer as I thought he would be, because he didn't want to do it. Right. Yeah. He didn't want to do the extra responsibilities and go to the trainings and get on the conference calls. Like, that is a very important prerequisite of what you just said, of what do you actually want to do here? Do you love doing what you're doing? Do you want to move up in the organization? Right. Because if you're skipping to step 2 of then deciding, okay, who makes the most sense to obtain the specific result we're going for, then you're going to be talking to the wrong people.
Yeah. 100%.
I like that. I love your paradigm on anyone can be a leader, and often everyone is a leader somewhere, right? Whether it's in the organization, 100%. In the family, in their community, like it's just a matter of where do you want to put your focus on leading, what brings you the most fulfillment, but also your paradigm on empowerment versus just management of people, like empowering people to make better decisions, empowering them to become better leaders, but only once you've poured into yourself and once you have your own house in order. But like you said, that never ends. So
No.
let me just tell you, Peter, because I want to talk about your Indispensable Leaders program, but
Sure.
I've really enjoyed this conversation because it's very clear that you are very thoughtful on this subject. I mean, this is what you do, but you come from the world of where you did this before you simply got on podcasts and talked about it, right? You come from this world and you speak from experience, not just from what you've learned through books and courses. Like it's very clear that you live these principles. So I just want to let you know, I'm really enjoying the conversation so far. So talk to me now about those listening who are like, wow, I really love everything he's talking about. What's the next step? You have your Indispensable Leaders program. Now talk to me, who is that for and what does that look like?
Yeah, 100%. So it's for managers, and it's also people that aren't yet in a management position, but it's people that have the ambition to get there, the ambition to become a leader, and they don't really know where to start, and they also don't really know how do you actually develop those skills that you need? How do you master those skills fully? I think it's very easy to pick up a book and just read it, right? But I'm not interested in intellectual knowledge. Don't get me wrong. You in the program, of course, you get new insights, but it's much more about how do you master them emotionally and physically, as in how do you actually understand them and how do you do it? So that's much more what it's about. It's about taking someone from where they are, which is being probably an okay leader, someone that does okay in management, to really being someone that gets amazing results for themselves and for the people that they're leading. And I see this time and time again, people that go through it think, wow, I can't believe the shifts I'm seeing myself. Other people are saying, man, you're so different. What's happened? And it's really about this personal change in you that you then take what you've done and you apply it to other people. So the program is really about how do you develop yourself as an individual, which is as a leader, and then you apply those concepts within your team. And the program actually has those both elements given to you. And it's a 24-week journey, if you will, because here's one of the things I've learned, and I keep on seeing this again and again and again. You know, a personal transformation, and it really is a transformation, it's a change in how you do things, doesn't happen in a 2-day training. Don't get me wrong, those are super impactful. They can be super impactful, I should say. And I do them all the time because I understand the value of immersion. But equally, there's something to be said for building momentum. There's something to be said for an immersion that takes more than some days, that actually takes several weeks, or in this case, half a year. And there's also something to be said for having the accountability and the follow through and the iterations on your approach for that time period. If you're doing this as an intellectual exercise, you'll understand the concepts very quickly, but it's the application and the real mastery of it. Because this is what I really believe. Leadership is someone that's a great leader. They've mastered the discipline of leadership. They haven't just intellectually mastered, they're actually doing it to the point where they can develop other leaders. And that's really what it's about. It's first and foremost getting those results at level 1, at your own level. And then you see immediately a change in how you're leading others. And then you also start to understand, well, how can I actually develop other leaders? And that's just in a really effective way of doing it. And actually, if you think about a change from not being particularly confident where you are to being incredibly proficient at what you're doing in the 6-month period, is actually a very short amount of time. If you really think about it, like from a bigger picture point of view.
That's amazing. So it's a 6-month program, 24 weeks, where they will learn these intellectual practices and insights, but the real growth comes from the application of the insights that they're learning. And I love that it's not just like 1-2 days and it's like, here you go, now you know how to be a leader. But it's like, here, take these, use these, and then come back next week. Let me know how you use them, and then we'll take it to the next step. And then these organizations that these leaders are a part of are going to be like, whoa, what's John doing? What is Susie doing? Like all of a sudden, she's a powerhouse. She's adding so much value. Like, Susie, what's the secret? and she's going to be like, it's the Indispensable Leaders Program with Peter Karius.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's literally, people tell me all the time, they say, well, this and this person said, you're so different. What's changed?
Yeah.
They see it in themselves. So it is absolutely true. And I love seeing that, because I mean, that's, part of the fun of being a coach is you actually see how other people develop. And then of course it's just a knock-on effect in their organizations and their daily lives, for that matter as well.
That's great. I want to respect your time, Peter. So for everyone listening, you can find Peter very active on LinkedIn. He's got a great LinkedIn page with events that he does. He'll mention when his next event is. And by the way, Peter offers free events and workshops that you can join as well. The next one is on February 20th, but this will likely be after that this will be posted. So follow him on LinkedIn. The link is in the description so you can see when those events are, as well as to start a conversation with Peter about even joining the Indispensable Leaders Program, should that make sense for you at this time. So Peter, I want to thank you for being on the show. This was a very high level and very fun conversation. You kept me on my toes, sir. So I appreciate that. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This was an awesome conversation. Whether you want to become a leader, whether you want to work on yourself so that you can become a leader in the future, or maybe you are already a leader in an organization and you want to take it to that next level and become truly indispensable, this conversation was for you. I've really enjoyed our time with Peter today. Links are in the description to check out Peter's Indispensable Leader Program, as well as his LinkedIn profile, so you can follow everything else that he's doing there. If you found value from this conversation, please share the show with just one other person who could use it. The show has grown massively over the last 6 months, especially because of you sharing the show. And for that, I am grateful. Thank you for being the best part of the Be Better team. Until we talk again next time, continue to be better. I'll talk to you soon.